Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we jump into tonight's second half, a couple links. As you all know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please, folks, leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go, and they do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to tonight's second half, shall we? One of my best friends is into ghost hunting and the paranormal. I've been on a few ghost hunts with him, not many, only 4, maybe 5. 2 in particular have stood out in my mind. After watching a few episodes of a well-known TV series on Prime TV last night, I was suddenly reminded of these 2. This is an experience that changed my entire view on the paranormal. So my friend, let's call him Bob, invited me to go on a ghost hunt. I know, there was me, Bob, and a woman who we will call Sally. Sally was a Wiccan. There were a few others there, but I can't remember them, and they bear no importance to this tale. They may have a tale of their own, but I never got to hear it. Anyway, on a Saturday night, we meet at Sally's house and waited until dark. Then we drove to some woods where there had been a few, maybe more than a few, suicides in the past, mainly involving a rope and a tree. At the start of the night, I was wondering what I had gotten myself into, as I just had images of being bored all night in the woods. After parking the cars, we climbed the fence/gate/stile, I can't remember, and entered the woods. It was very quiet, and the footpath seemed to lead into the darkness. Following the footpath seemed easy. However, at one point, I lost everyone. I had gone too far ahead and decided to head back. This seemed hard to do. The ground was flat, but turning back, I seemed to meet resistance. It was like climbing a mountain. I could go further into the woods really easy, no effort, but going away was not easy. So I just waited, and eventually they caught up. I'd mentioned this to Bob, and he said he also experienced the same sensation. Bob, myself, and Sally ended up splitting from the others, as they just wanted to hang back and take photos. So on we went, leaving them behind. After a point, we could see a bit of the clearing in the woods, and I could swear I could see people or shadows moving. Sally said quite possibly, and also said that it was the eve of something. I can't remember the details, but it was like something you'd read in a fairy tale. Anyway, Bob, who is also a medium, said to go and have a look, which Sally advised against. Bob and myself moved forward. Then the shadows vanished. Bob was freaking out a bit and said something about a man with a melting face. I thought, okay, well, nothing's here, and I moved forward. It was like I was in a dream at that point. I was just floating and moving. I had never practiced meditation. I have recently started then, but that is the best way to describe the feeling. I lost all awareness. At some point, I could hear Bob and Sally shouting my name, and I came back to reality. I had no idea where I was or how far I had gone. I don't know how I got to where I was. Bob and Sally said they had been following me for a while, shouting my name. I know at the time I looked at my watch and was shocked, but I don't remember the exact specifics. We headed back to the others, who were still standing or sitting around, saying that it had been a quiet evening and nothing happened. We all headed back to the cars. 1 or 2 hours had passed at this point, but I can't remember anything of significance other than what I had already said. When we got back to the fence, we stood there and talked for a while. Then I entered another trance state, and when I came to, I was trying to climb a tree. Bob said he had been talking to me, only it wasn't me, it was someone or something else. We then decided to leave. I was freaking out a bit after we climbed the fence and got back onto the road. I had an urge to take one last look at the tree. I wish I had taken a camera, so I went back. Just as I got to the fence, there was this big black dog looking at me. After a while, it just disappeared. I was off to the car straight away. We drove through some village, and I had this massive feeling of dread that something was following. Sally performed an exorcism or something along those lines. I am no expert in the magical arts. And all was good again. Like I said, I had been on a couple of ghost hunts, and there were two that turned me into a believer. Here is the other one. Also, when I say ghost hunt, maybe I should have changed that to summoning. In this hunt, there's myself, my mate Bob, and Sally, and some other guy. We'll just call him Wiener. I believe there may have been one or two other people. Now remember, Bob is a medium, and Sally is a Wiccan. She may have dabbled in other things as well. The evening started off with me going round to Bob's. I was wondering why he was taking so seriously. I thought we were going to a graveyard to take some photos, maybe record some noises. I then drove us to Sally's, where we met up with Wiener as well, whom I unfortunately remembered from school. He was also wondering why Sally and Bob were taking this so serious. I drive myself and Bob to a car park in the middle of nowhere. Sally and Wiener, maybe the others, led the way. We park the car, walk through some woods to a graveyard. We look around a bit. Nothing really happens. Bob starts talking to someone/something, but we can only hear Bob, not who or what he is speaking to. Wiener's super bored at this point. I'm kind of enjoying the cool, dark summer night. Then Bob stops, talks about some kid who died. I can't remember the specifics, as it's been quite a while. We start searching for graves for this kid. No kid. There's no grave. At this point, Sally tells Bob to get the board out. He opens my day sack. He packed it earlier. I didn't pay any attention to what he was packing. And pulls out and unrolls a Ouija board and pulls out a glass. At this point, alarm bells do start ringing in my head. Christian parents. Dad has a lot of knowledge about demons and exorcism, which he has never explained where he got that. But Sally knows her stuff, and Bob's been doing this for years. And Wiener is just laughing, so stuff it. Let's try this out. It's quite uneventful. Sally seems pretty disappointed. Then she goes and climbs upon a table, like a grave, and stuff starts to happen. Sally shouts, speaking and shouting. I ask Bob what she's doing. And he just replies, summoning the dead. I'm starting to enjoy this. Wiener's looking pretty uneasy. After 5 or 10 minutes, Sally climbs down and tells us to try the Ouija board again. The glass moves this time, but I'm not convinced. As soon as the thought of this being fake BS enters my head, the glass starts spinning. I'm starting to get an uneasy feeling myself at this point, and a feeling of dread. We ask the board some questions, then Sally says to the board to show itself. Then Bob starts speaking in a different voice and leads us to the overgrown bush. He rips away some brush, and in the middle is an old gravestone. Someone has paper and a crayon, so we take a rubbing. Sure enough, it's a kid that Bob was on about, except Bob is now talking as though he is this kid. I take a look around as the feelings I'm having are not good, and they are growing. In a nearby field, I see shadows and silhouettes moving. I tell Sally. Wiener is full-on freaking at this point. I'm not far off. We start to drag Bob away toward the car. Sally chucks some stuff over him, no idea what, and chants something. Bob's back to being Bob. We get back to the cars and drive off. I'm full-on freaking out at this point. I drop Bob off. He seems okay and says that this has happened before. When I get home, I climbed into bed, but do an internet search first for the kid on the gravestone. Absolutely nothing pops up. All searches for that area mention an old church, but nothing about a graveyard. this is the end of my experiences so far. I've had this one and the one I wrote about last time. I will be getting back into ghost hunting after this quarantine period, but I am doing some reading first on Celtic lore, the supernatural. I'm also getting a camera and a voice recorder, so I am at least prepared. Oh yeah, I mentioned my dad at the very start of all this. Well, I told my dad about this one day when we went out hiking. He stopped where we were and put his hand on my head and recited some Bible verses, then told me he had performed an exorcism. Today's second experience on the paranormal side. First, I'd like to mention that I live outside of the United States, so things may seem odd. I'll try my hardest to explain. Second, this may be long, so bear with me. This is one of many stories I have about living in a haunted school hostel, think boarding school, but the actual residential building is not attached to the school, but actually on the other side of town. I lived there with my sister. There were several experiences that I will share. My family, my mom, dad, and sister, and I had lived in a very haunted former mining town for about 5 years before my parents decided to move away to a bigger city. It was decided that my sister and I would stay behind and finish school, so we moved into the school hostel. Now, in all of that time we have attended the school, we have heard rumors that the hostel is haunted. Rumors about a female teacher who still roams the halls at night. You can hear her high heels clicking on the tile as she does her inspections. Knocks on the doors and windows, disembodied voices, shadow people, and full-fledged apparitions. We never really took them seriously, but maybe we should have. The hostel's huge, and the front part, which is a single entrance, leads to a dining hall, kitchen, and study area. At the back of the main study area is a small corridor that leads to the back part, where the bedrooms are at, where most of the activity takes place. The back is divided into two sides, boys and girls. You first walk down a long corridor of the girls' rooms, then you get to a middle door, and further down is the boys'. The middle door was locked every evening at nighttime. The layout of the bedrooms on either side is identical. 2 big 16-person rooms to be shared by the younger kids, 6 double rooms for the older kids, 4 single rooms for the prefects, and 1 big loft at the end for the teacher that supervised that side. Now that context is out of the way, I'll get to the experience. This takes place a year after living there and dealing with quite a lot of paranormal things. Everything rumored to be happening, in fact, happens, but with some horrible additions, like a mimic and a small girl who appeared both physically and in dreams, amongst others. At this point, my sister was in 11th grade, and I was a junior. Perfect, so she got a single room. My parents, after telling them everything that kept happening over the last year, did not want us living separately, so the school made arrangements, and my sister and I got a double room. The room had a huge metal closet, 2 beds, a fireplace with a chimney that we were allowed to use in the winter under supervision, but that doesn't matter when your sister is a prefect. And activity always, when we were together, so my sister and I moved the 2 beds together to form 1 big bed, moved it into the corner of the room, and like that's the way we slept. It kind of worked. One horrific night, though, my sister had attended a function at school that would end late at night, so I was left alone in the room for the evening. The first part of the evening was fine until a power outage hit the hostel at 1900. One thing you should know, there is always activity in the building, but it's always intensified when you are either alone or in the dark. Right then, I was both. I switched on my phone flashlight and attempted to sleep because it's still hours before my sister was due back and I had school the next day. As I laid my head down, I had my phone on my sister's pillow with the flashlight pointed up and the light to light up the room. Dozed off. The next thing I remember is being half awake and the room is pitch black. As I was trying to make sense of why the room was dark, I suddenly felt two hands grab my legs and start dragging me down the bed. Instantly, I woke up and turned my head but couldn't see anything, and I was still being dragged. I realized whatever was dragging me was heading toward the chimney. I opened my mouth and tried to scream when suddenly I heard knocking on the window, followed by my sister yelling my name. As soon as my sister yelled, the entity let go of my legs. Simultaneously, the darkness in the room lifted as my flashlight started to shine again. With the room now lit, I quickly turned around to the chimney to catch a glimpse of the dark mask shooting up the chimney. I only caught a quick look, but enough that I'll never forget what I saw. The being was on four legs, but instead of legs, at the end of the legs there were human hands. It looked furry. Think Lorax, but pitch black and furry. It had no head protruding, but rather two glowing red eyes between the upper set of feet and hands. It looked and felt evil. I stayed staring at the chimney even after it disappeared until my sister's shouting intensified and snapped me out of it. She was locked out of the building, so I had to dash all my way to the end of the girls' section, wake up our supervising teacher to let her in. I was panicked the whole way there that the creature may come back and attack me, or that I'd bump into another monstrosity in the dark. Luckily, I made it there without incident, and the teacher let my sister in. I immediately told her what had happened, and we moved the metal closet in front of the chimney and stayed awake the whole evening. The next morning, we called my parents and told them what happened. They immediately told us that they were on their way and to skip school. Pack up all our stuff. That afternoon, my parents arrived and removed us from the hostel. We ended up staying with a family friend until my sister graduated high school, and thereafter I was removed. It's been years, but this still haunts me and everything else that happened at that hostile building. It makes it hard to forget. It was just so much. Today's third experience on the paranormal side. So, two of my friends and I went ghost hunting, which is really just us walking around in haunted places and leaving 10 minutes later. In San Antonio, normally things go well. We pretend like we feel something scary, laugh it off, and go to the next location, but this time it was a little different for me. We found out about an old abandoned insane asylum. I think it was abandoned in the 90s. That is supposedly extremely haunted, and we decided to try and find it. When we got to the street that we found on Google, I felt a pit in my stomach. This was different from all of the other times we had gone to haunted locations. I knew something bad happened close to where we were. I was anxious, I'm not going to lie, but I am also the type of person to watch horror movies by myself and lead my friend group into a haunted house. The anxiety level I was feeling was similar to waiting outside of a haunted house, so for me it wasn't too extreme. All of a sudden, as we're driving, tears just start coming out of my eyes. I definitely wasn't crying out of fear or anxiety. I've felt that before. My feelings weren't extreme enough in that moment to be crying like how I was. I wasn't sobbing. I was just having a normal conversation with my friends, but my eyes were just crying. It felt like it was out of control. I couldn't stop it either. We ended up going back to my friend's place because we couldn't see the asylum, and it was getting late. When we got back to her place, we found the actual address for the asylum, and it was on the other side of the trees that I started crying at. I knew we were close to the place when I started crying, but we were quite literally next to it, and none of us had any idea. That was the strongest paranormal experience I have ever had, and I am so lost on what it could mean. Also considering seeing spirit/medium witchcraft runs in my family. Today's fourth experience on the paranormal side. One night, me and two of my buddies got off of work at the same time, around 10 or 11 or so. We met up to make a Walmart pit stop and go smoke some pot at a buddy's house. We decided to take this old country road. This road we usually take to get across town. It's hidden and no one ever on it. I can't remember if it was spring or fall, but it was a temperamental night. It was a foggy night. I was in shoddy and this other dude was in the back. Should mention that the Beast of Bray Road is about a half an hour away, and there is a barn where 2 sisters killed themselves within a mile or two. I see this thing jump in front of the car. The driver hits its brakes, but it's too late. It dissipates into the fog as we hit it. Did you just see that? The driver looks at me. We hop out of the car to investigate. No sign of anything, nothing in the grill. We didn't hit anything. The dude in the back seat had not seen anything and was more confused than us. The next 10 minutes on the drive was silent. Did you see that thing? The driver asks. I say, yeah, I saw it. What did you see? He described exactly what I saw. A dog about waist high, with sharp, long white teeth, beady red glowing eyes, and manged black disgusting fur that went down to the ground, jumped in front of the car. It dissipated into the fog immediately, and there was no sign that we hit it. We still to this day have no idea what happened that night or what it was, and I rarely see this guy anymore, but when I do, we're usually having a few beers, and there will be an awkward silence, and someone will say, "Hey, remember that dog?" Today's 5th experience on the paranormal side. I'm not necessarily seeking any advice since I'm okay with living with it. This is more of a rant. So I've lived in the same house for over 10 years. It was originally purchased by my aunt who bought it as new construction. She started to travel and let her son, my cousin, live there for a while until he got his feet under him. It was then purchased by my mom, and we've lived here since. We had a major problem finding a house because I'm hypersensitive to paranormal stuff. I had to physically leave just about every house we saw because it felt like the walls were speaking to me, and back then, I had a lot of other complications with my mental health, so it terrified me. My aunt's house was one of the few houses I could stay in more than 5 minutes. It was empty, vacant, and I had never been there before, just like all the other locations, but I was relatively comfortable in the house. That's why we moved here. Recently, however, it seems something or someone has found its way into the house. The first occurrence. I was slicing or coring some apples with one of those cutters you just push down on. Every apple gets cut into the same piece. However, after I cut my second apple, I noticed one of my slices was missing. I didn't eat it. Second, I was sitting on the couch playing video games and eating a snack. I took a bite of my cookie and set the other half on my knee. When I went back, the second half was not there. Again, I didn't eat it. Today's final experience on the paranormal side. About 15 years ago, my stepdad gave me a ride home from high school. We went away home we had never taken before, no reason in particular. As we turned right down the street, he drove half a block, and there were 3 children playing on the left-hand sidewalk and semi-spilling off on the road, kicking the ball, I believe. As he drove forward, I looked to the right, and the biggest dog I had ever seen was staring at them, no leash or collar, as if it had wandered there. It looked like it was going to kill them. He looked right into my eyes as we went by, and they were bright red. I don't mean in a normal way. Bright red eyes, black dog, almost like a giant black Saint Bernard, but not a Saint Bernard. It was looking at them for food. As we drove by, I said to my stepdad, "Did you see that dog looking at that kid?" He said, "What dog?" As if he had not noticed it. It was a giant black dog, like giant, just standing there, staring. It was super strange. There were no other people on the street seeing this dog. Surely parents of the children would have noticed it. Anyway, it was 4 o'clock. The kids didn't even see it. I'm convinced it was something. Red eyes, not red in a normal way. We drove home, and I always think of it to this day. All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed today's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, your support is truly what makes this channel so special and what makes it continue to grow and go. It is truly appreciated. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on your children, your pets, your friends, and family. We know these creatures are real, and we know they are out there. The little bit of information that we could share with those folks may keep them safe one day. God bless you all.